Aiden is under obligation to attend a Halloween party, which his new friend, Jacques Chrétien, is determined to keep him to that promise. And yet, one can never say where fate will intervene. If going to a raucous Halloween party may be described as traumatic for someone with autism, then the remedy is soon at hand in the form of a beautiful trick-or-treater. Chapter 6: The Halloween Party. Sleep, regardless the hour attempted, was work, and given the lingering impression of the frightful phone call, it might be delayed that evening. The resident went outside to search his car for the mailer pouch Omar gave him before leaving Chicago. Locating it under an empty Kleenex box, he tore open the flap to find sleeping pills. Omar never told him where he got them, and Aiden never asked. The dispenser was unmarked, but was likely Zolpidem. A low thump in the wall startled him while he changed into his pajamas. He walked to the guest room with his candle in a show of intimidation. The forgotten suitcase discovered that morning greeted him. The piece of luggage apparently fell over. It was removed and carried to the attic studio, where it was placed on his work table, and with the late thought that he never bothered to look inside. On unfastening the latches, a rap of knuckles gamboled up the steps. Aiden headed back down the 2 flights with his light, but spied no one through the door's peephole. The Halloween prank was not appreciated. Another knock happened while he stood there, and throwing open the door to nab his culprit, he found only Jacques, too short to be seen in the spyglass, teetering over his welcome mat. White grease paint intensified his red, whiskey-soaked eyes.
"Your doorbell doesn't work,"
he complained. Aiden had forgotten about the party. He always jumped into promises blindly, only to regret them hours, if not minutes, later. Looking down at his pajamas, he hawed, "I'm tucked in for the night."
"It's awfully early for a coffeeholic to go to bed,"
came the dire diagnosis.
"Can I come in?"
The rattled resident was somewhat relieved for the company. The performance artist sauntered in and pulled a half-consumed bottle of spirits from his goodie bag.
"We can have a party here. Got any cups?"
The unprepared host dropped his candle holder on a ledge and set off in search of clean glasses. Jacques stared up the dark staircase in the interval, but could not see the top.
"Where's your studio?"
Aiden emerged from the kitchen with a roll of Dixie cups. "In the attic, although the house is without power." The performance artist rallied.
"If the old masters could paint by candlelight, we sure as heck can manage a quick look-see."
The painter nodded, though doubted the inebriated dwarf was capable of negotiating so many steps. He led the way slowly, pausing halfway to let his visitor catch his breath and view the daedalus Monet painting. The picture was too high on the wall to see well, so the shorter man shot a glance into the open bedroom doorway. Spying the camcorder set up by the bed, he asked,
"Are you making pornos?"
"More like a documentary on the nocturnal habits of a sleepwalker." Jacques held up his paper cup.
"Enough of this stuff, and I guarantee you won't budge from bed to piss."
With the utterance, the attic door above the 2 men creaked on its hinges. A chill flew down to extinguish the candle. "I left the skylight open," Aiden explained, placing the candle holder on the floor while he groped in a pocket. "The matches are downstairs." Jacques' voice was weaker in the darkness.
"That's all right. We can look at your work another time."
The 2 poked their way back down to the ground floor, and Aiden relit the candle. The guest, plopping in a chair, wore a spooked expression that the feathery light could hardly mitigate. After a few awkward seconds, the host tried to distract him in conversation about performance art. Frowning, the graduate student was brittle.
"I think Emerson said art was a jealous mistress. But for me, we're just in an estranged marriage."
The painter could relate to Jacques' inertia and not wanting to be engaged on the topic, although alcohol went no ways towards loosening either man's tongue on any other subject, or lightening the gloomy mood of the house. Aiden's capacity for casual conversation was easily exhausted, and on stumbling into silences, it was like being strapped in a dentist chair. He was in a position where he would either have to toss the drunk dwarf out after a while or cave in on the idea of the party. Given his overall reluctance to assert himself, the latter course seemed the lesser of two evils. If the party proved unbearable, he reasoned he could simply bug out and make an inconspicuous exit, by which time Jacques would be too plastered to notice. The host, gulping the last of his repugnant drink, placed the crumpled cup on the coffee table and eyed his guest with resolve. "Let's go to this party. I need to dress."
Don't bother,
chimed the provisional friend, who pulled a tuxedo from his bottomless sack. It was still in a dry cleaner's bag.
Here's your costume.
Costume? Jacques' brow arched innocently.
Didn't I mention that part?
The painter stiffened when the suit was held against his long torso for size. His anxiety dulled with the kick of the drink. "Give me a second to change." Jacques tore the plastic off the suit.
Throw it on over the pajamas.
The disinclined man dropped to the edge of the couch to negotiate the trousers. "I need shoes, at least."
No time for that either,
grunted the valet.
The slippers will do. We're just walking up the block. This is a slipper kind of town.
The legs and sleeves of the tuxedo were mockingly short, and the pajamas, sticking out at both ends, added insult to injury. The performance artist was satisfied.
The jacket covers the worst of it.
Jacques endeavored to keep stride with his taller companion, but spirits impaired his motor ability. As both neared their apparent destination, a two-story house, it resembled a snaggle-toothed jack-o'-lantern. Boisterous revelers were belched out onto its porch in a greeting. Aiden drew in breath before hacking his way through the melee past the door. Costume partiers were thick in the overheated entryway, and the momentary opening was sealed off to bar retreat, leaving the mismatched pair to push forward without a heading. Jacques, in spite of being nearly trampled, was instantly in the flow, while his steerage lagged behind. Finding the pair of them shoved to the perimeter, the graduate student pointed out a canvas hanging over a sofa.
That's the work of the professor,
he exclaimed.
The guy who lives here.
The painter squinted through the cigarette haze at the portrait of a nude woman. Jacques bristled.
This prof has screwed more co-eds than the school's football team, and he gets to hang his trophy hides up for his wife and the faculty to praise. What a racket.
The artist model was denied a head, and her body was cropped in the frame, so to elevate through abstraction, even as it titillated. Given Jacques' remarks about impropriety, this was perhaps done to guard against self-recrimination as much as for aesthetic reasons. Aiden wanted to view the art critically, but the quality of the work denied him his customary feeling of superiority. He hated art as much as loved it, and precisely because it had a nasty way of making high-minded such men of low character. His attention could not be long diverted from the unruly gathering. None of the revelers swung from the light fixtures, necessarily, but vases and ashtrays, too near table edges, were in danger of toppling. Imbibing alcohol gave Aiden no leverage over his agoraphobia, nor did it make the barrage of elbows and cackles any less intolerable. In spite of the commotion, one fellow seemed more out of place than he. This partier wore earmuffs and a blindfold as part of an incommodious costume, and his movements were glacial compared to those around him. He appeared to be a little island of calm in a calamitous sea. Aiden grabbed Jacques' ear. "Is that a costume?"
No, he's part of the sensory deprivation project,
explained the friend.
The test subjects were over at Peters Hall, but some students set fire to the building after the last home game. So the psychology department has put him up at a hotel.
Aiden was bemused. But why is he at a party if... Jacques threw up his hand to acknowledge several comrades huddled in a dim corner. One gestured the latecomers over. No one in this enclave wore a costume, and their standoffish appearance seemed more to make an impression than to mingle. Jacques made introductions before launching into departmental politics with the fellow grads, although his recruited companion gravitated steadily to the periphery. Aiden was never comfortable in groups of strangers, so evaded catastrophe by visually grafting himself to someone's coat sleeve for cover, no matter how superficial or non-existent the acquaintance. After a while, the performance artist was oblivious to his presence, so the painter melted further into the background. Several underage gatecrashers were just then queuing up in a keg line close to the staircase. Above them, an inflatable woman had been violated with a red highlighter pen and swung from the balustrade like a pirate flag. Aiden's sense, warranted or not, was that every set of piteous eyes in the place was preoccupied with his friendless state. He looked past the multitude and surmised the level of difficulty that lay between him and a desired exit. Unable to see any way to it, he sought temporary relief by taking the path of least resistance up to the darker, less populated second floor. The air was cooler here, although the costumes were creepier than those downstairs. As the unsure guest negotiated the terrain, he realized he was on the back end of something untoward. Several men were gathered around an open doorway, watching a couple go at it on a bed. The rhythmic clinking of a loose belt buckle served as a dinner bell. Aiden pushed through the clogged artery, but glimpsed the rude hieroglyph of a splayed Cleopatra under her laboring lover. The woman's gaze was fixed on him in the doorway, though it was her cry that chased him to the opposite end of the corridor. A wiry pirate with a coat-hanger parrot stepped out of the shadows.
"That be a mermaid, matey,"
he shouted.
"That be her siren song. Tie yourself to the mast to escape her lure, if you takes me meaning."
The fleer pulled up short in the jaws of the trap, realizing it was only a partier parroting the delusional wino met earlier that day. He smiled nervously before turning back to the staircase, with half a mind to dive down it. If it was possible, more people were in the house than when he came in. The absconder almost made it to the bottom of the stairs before becoming stuck. He fished around for Jacques, but the little man was no longer seen in the fray. A scantily clad girl passed down where he stood on the steps. There was a whiff of cinnamon in the brush and a sprinkling of fake bronze skin cream. Aiden spotted a coiled snake bracelet around her arm and knew she was the exhibitionist from the upstairs bedroom. Without making eye contact, she smiled like a thief in her slink. Tufts of black wig slapped her flushed cheeks. Her ample and all but liberated bosom gamboled about under a safety pin chemise, and was reason enough for the crowd of men at the foot of the stairs to let her merge into traffic. The painter was left in the bottleneck. As the outsider continued to stand shoulders above the gatekeeper's disinterest, both in body and moral compass, he detected the smell of pipe tobacco mingling with cigarette smoke. He glanced up at the top of the landing to see an older man, also not wearing a costume. A trimmed beard had him looking like Lord of the Manor, gazing smugly over his domain. This alone pegged him as the other party to the sexual shenanigans. He did not notice the painter, but drifted down the steps in the manner of Moses parting waters. With elbow patches on his blazer and a sense of entitlement only the tenure track could engender, he pushed effortlessly through the throng. He headed towards a handsome woman his own age, posing as a water sprite. She leaned on a cane for support, yet otherwise appeared effervescent in conversation. Seeing him approach, her free hand lit on his cheek. He swooned over her like a lovesick schoolboy. Aiden suspected from her composure that she knew what transpired upstairs. The two turned to share a staged kiss before moving together towards the kitchen. A retinue closed ranks behind them in pursuit of more alcohol. An opening was created in the wake, and the trapped man acted on it. The flow of bodies did not lead to the front door, but to a secluded hallway. Low light in a book-lined room suggested a back way out, and in peeking around a shelf, Aiden was glad to see glass doors facing onto a veranda. In his escape, he stumbled over a piano. The baby grand was out of tune, but not so out of tune to prevent him from pecking at a few dusty keys. It was rare when he had access to a piano, though not rare for him to abandon a party of pleasure to entertain himself elsewhere on the premises. Honestly, the solitary man had no interest in forming a friendship with Jacques, and given his history of not reciprocating social interest, the few friends he did have were lost mainly through attrition. When inclined to socialize, Aiden was better with small groups. It was truer to say he desired company more than friendship, for he found it hard to distinguish between his genuine social need for others and his occasional need for an audience. That he preferred his own constructive company was clear, for the painter found other artists too idle to endure for long. Parties were by definition exercises in idleness, and idleness was neither a vice nor virtue he possessed. Aiden was at the keyboard mere minutes when a woman darkened the veranda doors. She tapped a pane, wanting to be let in, so the intrigued pianist rose to comply. Swishing into the unlit room with a scratch of tulle and satin, she unhooked a high heel and clapped it loudly against a ledge of masonry. A mud clot flew off to land inside the fireplace screen. "Are you a groom or a pallbearer in that monkey suit?" she asked. Aiden had forgotten about his silly tuxedo. The alcohol spoke for him. Depends on your point of view. Light from the veranda muddied the young woman's silhouetted features, but her smile was as discernible as the improbable pair of black-rimmed glasses she sported. She nudged the hefty spectacles back up on her nose before inquiring, "Do you know Heart and Soul?" The duet was a party standard. Aiden played dumb. The brunette slipped back into her shoe and slid across the piano bench, banking into him like a perfumed silk pillow. She proceeded to bang out a formidable rendition of Chopsticks. "I took just enough piano lessons as a child to drive the mice from our house," she informed him. Drawn into the easy patter, he observed, a more effective form of fumigation than dance lessons. "I was too tall for dance," was her lament. "I was too chesty for the cello," sighed he. The recitalist bounded up in the next breath, keeping her straight face, and gestured to the door. "Would you care to keep me company while I look for someone?" Nodding, the blindsided man fell obediently behind her rustle of strapless formal wear. It was only in the half-light of the hallway that he realized the costume was a wedding dress, minus a train. She did not so much merge into the party as descended on it from a silvery cloud. The smoky light remained poor, but there was enough of it for the escort to realize he had been trading one-liners with a woman of uncommon beauty. She glanced back at him with beguiling blue-green eyes before setting a course for someone in tea-stained mummy wraps. Wanting to catch up, Aiden purposefully lagged behind. His first impression of her was one of a bolting bride, but seeing her glide serenely across the room, reducing everything around her to backdrop, made him think she had stepped off a freshly finished Gil Elvgren canvas, one portraying a nubile heroine charging social ramparts in a charm offensive. Intoxicated on this thought, the painter studied the glistening brushwork from a distance, how the flick of a round brush caught the curl of an eyelash, and the bold swivel of a flat filbert mimicked the zigzag of her opalescent dress. She was quickly frowning and came back to where he stood. You're not keeping up. Her skin resembled milky alabaster. Its complexion sent him, in his mind at least, delving into his tackle box for tubes of paint. Rose madder, airlid yellow, ultramarine blue, zinc white. He drew in the stuffy air to chase away his late stupefaction. Wasn't that him? He asked. The person you were looking for? Come, she said, entwining a silk-gloved arm around his rental sleeve. Keep up. They brushed a table covered with toppled plastic cups. The bride picked up 2 empty ones and sniffed them. These smell clean, she declared on handing one to him. His smelled of beer. Did the scullery maid run off with the good crystal? Miss Elegance had stepped out of character to eye the staircase, leaving him, as had Jacques, to momentarily heal. She tugged again on his thin frame. We need something stronger than beer. The beauty waved off a volley of crass overtures with her wand of an arm and started up the stairs. The painter was inconveniently thinking about more brushes on the ascent. Synthetic sables for her skin, a coarser hog's hair brush for the strong dark line of her hair. Someone fell against them coming down the stairs, practically pushing them into an embrace. The dithering man, a 4th person not wearing a costume, appeared lost. I thought it was the black monolith from 2001, he mumbled. But it's not. He continued his clumsy descent, evidently expecting no reply. Aiden was again bouncing around among the shadowy, half-naked characters that owned the 2nd floor. His easier companion was not shy about moseying up to a fellow slouching against the wall. He wheezed through small nostril slits in his plastic Casper the Friendly Ghost mask and ogled a powder-wigged cutie popping out of a bodice. The bride queried him, Is there anything stronger than beer? Pulling a sloshing bottle out of his red-splattered lab coat, the man thrust it to the ceiling. What are you going to give me for it? His exertion succeeded in throwing him off balance, whereupon he tumbled comically to the floor to watch his peppermint schnapps roll away. The enterprising woman picked up the bottle and poured a generous amount of beverage into the borrowed cups from a bureau. Once the alcohol was returned to the passed-out partier's pocket, she dragged her new friend along to a door that showed promise. It's empty, she proclaimed enthusiastically. When the door closed them off from the rest of the celebration, Aiden braced himself against the darker, quieter space. They had traded one remote part of the house for another, and he suspected whatever plan had been in the works was scrapped. Within seconds, his eyes adapted to the faint light, leaving him to puzzle at his company's wincing on each slurp of her drink. He was thrown by her self-inflicted torture. She detected a critical cast to his look and threw up another scream, another withering smile. Will we be discovered? She asked slyly. Discovered by whom? To this his companion gave no reply, although the silence was a kind of reply. Aiden stumbled to rephrase his question, but was spared. Are you a graduate student? Charged her second, less ambiguous question. I guess you could call me an artist in residence. She glowed with approval. I'm an MFA candidate myself. What's your area? Nudging her glasses again up her nose, she regaled. Photography, but that's only to float me until my career in the food industry takes off. A double major is wise. The impromptu couple continued to stand toe-to-toe in the shadows, rashly drinking their plunder without rhyme or reason. Aiden was not sure why both were in a hurry to become drunk, but wherever the girl was going, he wanted to come along. Maybe we should eat something, he suggested. I saw some Vienna sausages on stale crackers downstairs. I'm a vegetarian, she hiccuped, adding, most of the time. He spoke with conviction. If you're going to be an artist, then you need to eat meat. Wasn't Da Vinci a vegetarian? And how many works of art did he make in his lifetime? Not many, as it turns out. Meat gives you stamina. Pleased by the turn of conversation, the woman blurted her thinking.
We look like we belong together on a wedding cake.
Aiden looked down to his too small rental. I look like I'm due in small claims court tomorrow to sue the bastard dry cleaners who did this to my suit. The woozy bride snickered on her next gulp. She dropped to the edge of a sturdy four-poster bed, but missed its broad target to land indignantly on her bottom in the floor. The misstep made her double over with laughter.
I don't know where my ass begins and ends in this dress,
she cried. Fumbling to lift herself with his feeble assistance, she was too debilitated by her fit of giggles to rise. She was resigned to sit it out, and with pained side glances at her teetering groom extending a hand, the sight of him in the midget's tux sent her careening to the rug with more snorts, which made her guffaw all the harder. Aiden dropped to his knees to create a manageable center of gravity, although the girl's head was now somehow under the bedskirt. He pulled at her ankles, trying to dissuade her from crawling further under the bed. Flat on her stomach, she shimmied like a jello mold slathered in whipped cream, conveying in the broadest strokes the shapely body concealed beneath the billowy satin.
I think we can get out this way,
insisted she. Aiden inadvertently pulled off one of her expensive-looking high heels. It flew over his head to land somewhere in the dark room. He was abruptly on his back, swimming. The beauty straddled him with a hard stare. Her feathery cleavage got him thinking about blending brushes.
Where's my shoe gone?
Her breath was peppermint candy and hardly the smelling salts he required. I'm looking for it on the ceiling, he informed her, because that's the only part of the room that isn't spinning. She started snickering again, threatening to collapse on top of him. A change of headwinds overtook her, however, and left her to yelp.
The limo! I forgot the limo!
The young woman clambered to her feet and brought him up behind her. She wavered before careening into the side of the bed a second time. Her hand rose to cover her mouth, as if to call back an expletive. Aiden was slow grasping the gravity of her reaction. He followed her bleary stare to the bed where, unbeknownst to them both, a darkly attired man slept. The painter recognized him instantly as the sensory deprivation character from downstairs. For the briefest moment, the graduate photographer appeared to be swerving toward another bout of giggles, but a bedpost steadied her for a sober proclamation.
I need to pee before we leave.
The bride hobbled on her one remaining heel to the bedroom door. Opening it, she was about to step over an amorous couple stretched out on the hallway floor, yet paused to size up the woman's shoes. The heel was hastily snatched from a foot, and the wobbly groom was used for support while the marauder wiggled into it. She then moved to another door that was either a bathroom or closet and charged in without knocking. A young man, with painted-on 5 o'clock shadow, was looking out a bathroom window. He was trouserless, under a trench coat, and mused on cue.
I used to know a girl who lived in that house across the street.
Releasing the ends of his outer garment, a large cylindrical balloon filled with helium rose between his legs. Flesh-colored pantyhose held it in place, as well as 2 smaller, round balloons doubling for testicles.
She used to live there,
he explained, pointing at the window with his freakishly large member.
in that attic apartment.
The bride neither blushed nor recoiled when the fellow turned to face her, but commented dryly on the reinforced nylon toe of the hosiery.
I see you're not circumcised.
The bathroom door was unhurriedly closed on the bizarre scene, and the young woman once more dissolved into laughter. There was no rejoinder Aiden could add to the unscripted moment. He watched her collapse again to the floor. Their dynamic was different from what it had been in the private bedroom. He felt embarrassed, but could not say if it was for her or him. Surely she laughed more at his nonplussed reaction than to the obscene joke. The groom was slower lending a hand to pull her up, and felt the weight of her body intrusively in the hoist. Her skin briefly dulled, and the lace and needlework of the wedding dress passingly resembled something out of a grandmother's sewing drawer. The accidental newlyweds continued to the stairs and surveyed the ragged partiers obstructing the way. The chances of getting down without a tumble seemed doubtful, so the willful girl spun around to another room.
I know another way out.
Again in a dark room, Aiden recognized the sofa bed where the lovers earlier put on their performance. The smell of linseed oil told him they were invading an art studio. At first he perceived no evidence of canvases, but floor-to-ceiling paintings soon materialized. Each was covered in coats of crystalline asphaltum paint, and in their lack of description they bore striking resemblance to the work of minimalist artist Ed Reinhardt. The flummoxed trespasser could not connect these boilerplate abstracts to the artist who painted the nude portrait in the living room. The determined guide divined a path between a work table covered with crusty paints and an easel. A Japanese screen offered one last obstacle, and in ducking behind it, a door was at hand. It opened onto narrow, accordion-like stairs. She yanked on his arm.
Keep up.
The unlit treads barely accommodated the length of a foot, but mercifully, they were soon at another creaking door that put them in a backyard. Aiden was relieved to return to the chill out of doors, but his ecstatic companion had already maneuvered around leaf-strewn patio furniture to unlatch a gate.
Hurry,
she exclaimed. A stretch limo was parked at the curb, with its motor running. He was hustled into the back of it, and the driver, without prompting, peeled away. With the pandemonium behind them, the bumbling groom pulled a few grains of rice from the cuff of his rental pants and endeavored to grasp their significance. His bride was preoccupied with her itinerary. A silk-gloved knuckle rose to rap on the window.
Stop here,
she called to the driver.
Stop here, I'm hungry.
The limo pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store, and the woman fell out to waddle to the door. Aiden followed, with something like awe. Once inside, she plucked a rose from a display case and thumped the nose of the pimply-faced store clerk.
Are you circumcised, my pet?
She purred. The young man turned redder. The bride snagged deer jerky from the counter and dropped it into the groom's tuxedo coat pocket.
Here's a little piece of Bambi's mother to munch on, Mr. Picasso, while you're painting.
2 boxes of powdered donuts were grabbed off a shelf and handed to him. A copy of Playboy was tossed on top of the forming pile with another wry remark.
I hear the articles are good.
By the time Aiden produced his wallet at the register, his high-spirited companion had seized the magazine and returned to the limo. He rejoined the fellow party defector and found the Playboy centerfold spread audaciously over her lap. She perused the glossy nude disinterestedly.
Do you whack off to pictures like this?
He was gentler. I only connect the moles and freckles. The photographer gasped.
This woman has no marks on her body whatsoever. They've all been removed with an airbrush.
Do you have a pen? The doubter poked around in a sleek oblong purse to produce an uncapped pen. Aiden took it and, hunching over, scratched "Eat More Deer" on the centerfold's leg. You see, he explained, those airbrush artists don't remove the freckles. They move them around to create subliminal messages, just to boost meat sales among testosterone-charged males. Rolling up the magazine, she swatted him like a pesky fly she was letting off with a warning. The limo resumed its odyssey without either much noticing. When the vehicle turned down a rural road, the groom squinted out the tinted window at a spiraling column of smoke. College revelers emerged along the gravel shoulders of the same byway. Each greeted the approaching headlights with rude gestures and beer cans. All, however, staggered in the wrong direction. The woman was doleful.
Oh no, We've missed it.
They were directly to a cutaway, where a slope, at variance to the terrain, rose at the far end of a grassy expanse. Hued in the eerie glow, the summit was imagined to have struggled under a skyscraping latticework of felled trees in the hour before, and then to be consumed in a monumental fire. It was hard to gauge its distance, whether the mound sat on the horizon or, allowing for the curvature of the earth, originated below it. The sky was insufficient to contain it or even allow it to be properly understood. The girl was slower out of the car this time, clutching Aiden with a measure of regret.
There's no one left.
Scaling the Versant, the pair found the remains of an effigy still crackling in the embers. The stargazer sought relief in Orion's nebula overhead, which moved coolly against the heavens. Her eyes, also stinging from the dissipating smoke, followed his, and she observed.
They say pagans used to light bonfires during the short days of winter, hoping to tempt the sun back to the sky. They say that's where Christmas trees came from.
The dark-haired oracle turned to limp back down the slope in her mismatched shoes. He called after her. I hope you're not too disappointed. Without looking back, she almost sang.
Never.
He caught up with her at the bottom of the hill, but instead of heading straight to the car, the bride took the groom's hand in a bashful way and pulled him off the path. Approaching taller grass, she released his fingers and removed her glasses to her purse.
I need to pee,
she declared, handing him the clutch bag.
Will you watch out for me?
He thought to give her privacy, but her piercing blue-green eyes paralyzed him. She walked backwards a few paces before reaching under a fluff of tulle to tug on a pair of champagne-colored thongs. With pleated satin bundled in her arms, she conducted her business with straightforwardness and a Cheshire cat grin. The man was transfixed in the unblinking middle of it. On finishing, she was reluctant to break her spell over him.
I have some Kleenex in my purse, love.
Aiden was still angling for breath, yet managed to scare up a tissue. After pulling up the briefs and her garters, she took his hand with a gentle squeeze. Her lips grazed his beet-red ear.
One night I'll bring you out here when there are a million stars to see.
Aiden struggled with converging but dissimilar strands of intoxication. His shadow, barely recognizable to him now, was irrevocably connected to the hem of her gleaming dress. She trembled close to the edge of something on the haunted landscape, something both melancholy and precious. The stretched limousine was off again, heading toward town. The reposed man remained quiet until he was obliged to give directions to his house. The bride beamed.
You live near me.
The long car pulled up to the curb and the resident got out. He glanced back over his shoulder at the unopened boxes of donuts still in the floorboard. The comedy of it had drained away. She was at his heels, though more like blood surging up through the veins in his calves. Rapidly he approached the part of the evening for which he had no script. Exposition was his strong suit, his only suit. He fiddled for the keys in his pants, warbling. The electricity is out, I'm afraid. A stiff rustle pushed past his murmur through the crack in the door, where the dark foyer beckoned. Pulsing light caught on the stair rail. The television was on. Aiden turned back to find no one behind him. The limo had already driven away.